This is an Irreverent podcast. Check out irreverent.fm for shows from all our friends. Hello and welcome to Evangelical. I'm your host, Blake Chastain. My guest this week is the musician Trey Pearson, and the track you're hearing right now is from his first solo album, Love is Love. Trey was the lead singer of the popular Christian rock band Everyday Sunday, and 2 years ago he came out publicly as gay. We talk about his experiences on the Christian rock circuit, and he speaks at length about how he wrestled with his sexuality for years and how it impacted his marriage and, well, his entire life. As always, it's best to let him tell the story. Trey's poured a lot of these experiences into this newest album, and he's currently on the road. You can find his upcoming tour dates online at treypearson.com and follow him on Twitter and Instagram at Trey Pearson. You can find his album, Love is Love, on Spotify and anywhere else you stream or purchase music. As always, you can find me on Twitter at brchastain, follow the show at XEvangelicalPod, and join the XEvangelical Facebook group over on Facebook. You can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/XEvangelicalPod, and I always appreciate it if you do take a couple of minutes to go over to Apple Podcasts or iTunes and rate and review the show there. It helps more people find the show and is a huge help. All right, everyone, let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to XEvangelical. My guest this week is Trey Pearson. Trey is a singer-songwriter who spent much of his career in a Christian rock band, and then a couple of years ago came out and is now a solo artist and has just released his his first solo album, Love is Love. Welcome to the show, Trey.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm really glad we were able to arrange this.
Yeah.
We actually had... Let's go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to explain how we met, but...
Yeah. We were going the same way.
We
actually
met a year ago, right?
That's right, yep.
I was performing a show in Indiana, and you happen to know a good friend of mine, and came along for the ride.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, and so if there are any longtime listeners, it was actually Jonathan Dodrell who was the first guest on the show on episode 1.
Really?
So,
wow.
So I
got to go to the archives.
Yeah. So you actually know John from growing up, right? And
yeah, we went to youth camp together.
Oh, okay.
So we sort of met as teenagers and had a close friend that we were both very connected to, and just kind of hit it off and became friends, and have sort of stayed in touch over the years, and both sort of progressed, faith-wise, I would say, in a similar trajectory, and we've always kind of been able to have those sorts of conversations.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned that you met at youth camp. So where we generally start with these conversations is getting a good sense of of your upbringing and how you were sort of initially exposed to religion and that sort of stuff. So how did that play into your life, and where did you grow up, that sort of thing?
I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, which is where I still live most of the time. I grew up in actually a small town right outside the city, where I was raised in a very Calvinistic, 5-point Calvinism, non-denominational church. So pretty Baptist, but maybe even more, maybe even more fundamentalist, and doubling down on the predestination and eternal security and all those kinds of things that come with anybody that's familiar with that kind of world of Calvinism.
For sure.
So I grew up heavily entrenched in that, and as a teenager, when I was 14, I got invited to a Wesleyan youth group, which would be the same denomination that I met, our mutual friend, and got very involved in the youth group there. Eventually started going to church there all the time. my family stayed at the Calvinist church, but I got very involved there. And so Wesleyan, to explain to people that aren't familiar, would be similar to Nazarene, which are these kind of small, they're like a little more fundamentalist, evangelical break-off versions of Methodists.
Yep.
And so, really big on the no drinking, no smoking, don't cuss, be a good Christian kind of sort of mentality.
Right.
And but they were very different from my perspective growing up, in the sense that they believed in free will and things like that, which was a weird thing for a teenager to wrestle with.
Right.
Most of my other friends were wrestling with much different things than me at that point, like what girl they wanted to sleep with, or I didn't want to sleep with any girl, and I was wrestling with predestination and free will. And so it is kind of a weird mixed bag, and
right.
which I'm sure most people listening have their own ingredients of their own weird mixed bag, but
right.
that is mine.
I'm sure that people can probably relate to that listen to this show, at least, of weird like youth group like angst over which is true, your Wesleyan Arminian friends or your 5-point Calvinist.
So as much as I grew up in this sort of very super Christian family, I don't know, that I was very in love with the Bible and with my faith from the time I was a small kid.
Yeah.
But I didn't know a whole lot about Christian music growing up until I ended up in this youth group. And so I'd heard of a couple artists, but not really. And then I got involved in this youth group, and all of a sudden we're going to like Christian rock concerts, and it was the whole gamut. So at 14, I got heavily influenced by that. Now, I also grew up teaching myself how to play piano, and I grew up actually doing professional theater downtown Columbus through middle school and into high school. And so when I got invited to this youth group, I loved performing on stage. I loved singing. There were these kids at this youth group that would write songs and play them for the youth group, and I just thought that was the coolest thing. So I knew how to play chords on a piano, and I thought, hey, I could do that. So I decided to write some songs and put a band together to play them. And so I was, it was just like this very influential time in my life as an adolescent, where I put this rock band together, and had enough arrogance to think I could do it for a living. And so I went to college for a year at Indiana Wesleyan University.
Hey, alma mater represents.
Exciting. And I decided at that point, what am I doing here? I should drop out and try to get a record deal. So I did. And so I took this Christian band that I had. I made a full-length independent album, and I signed a record deal, and went out on tour, and basically have been touring pretty much my whole adult life. And that's sort of I think the basis of like what the trajectory of my growing up was like, because I was so moved and excited by these sort of bands that had the same faith as mine. It was something that I just felt like so much a part of, that I really wanted to use my talents to you laugh at the phrasing, but like to make an impact for the kingdom of God,
Right.
And I thought, wow, like that sounds awesome.
So it was very genuine for you. Like that was like a very genuine,
absolutely,
ambition and drive.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. I mean, like it seems like it came from like a more, purely motivated place than an opportunistic sort of I'm gonna crack into the Christian market, and then and then pivot, or be a crossover hit or
Right.
whatever. This was
Yeah.
actually
Yeah. I
something
think
that you
that,
wanted
I
in
mean,
that space.
right. I think you quickly getting into the industry and sort of seeing behind the curtain and how it all is. It was easy to quickly realize it wasn't like what I thought it was going to be like.
Mm,
And I would say that, yeah, those goals definitely changed over the years.
yeah.
And um, I, I realized that, in quick time as a young adult that's touring the world, it's kind of this thing where you want to be known for your music and not, just sort of some what you're writing, or, just your, I don't know. Quickly became these ideas of like, are we selling Jesus, or what is Christian music, and
Right.
why is this Christian when you see all the things going on behind? How is this different?
Right.
Yeah, there were a lot of questions that came up, and I think one amazing thing that comes from touring and traveling around the world is you really see a lot of people that do live differently than you, that think differently than you, and it really challenges your worldview. And yeah, I mean, I definitely know I wouldn't be where I am, or like the person I am, if it hadn't have happened that way. And so that's interesting to think about.
Hmm. So yeah, like I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that, as far as both like how, when you're in this sort of I feel like Christian artists are expected to be, professional Christians. They're supposed to be
Sure,
these.
yeah.
They're supposed to, like, they are supposed to have this sort of approach and have this, okay, I'm a musician, but I'm also like a Christian, and so like my music
Yeah,
and
and not just a Christian. The audience wants you to be the kind of Christian they are, and to think, like,
mm-hmm.
kind of have the same beliefs and worldview and perspective, and all of a sudden you find yourself playing in thousands of different churches all over the world, and all these churches have different beliefs about different things, um, and so that was very interesting in a sense of, I think the most nerve wracking things were when you would go into these more charismatic churches,
Mm,
and they expected you to believe in what they believe about, like, what is it, being slain in the spirit, or speaking
yeah.
in tongues, or like kind of things that creeped me out, to be quite honest. And I did not grow up in any of those sort of environments, but I've definitely seen a lot of it now, which is different. But I think it wasn't just that, but multiple things that really kind of led me to keep challenging myself why I thought what I thought. And um I think I already had that sort of thing in me as a kid that had grown up with this sort of certain way of seeing the Bible and my faith, that got challenged quickly as a young teenager, moving to a different denomination, going, just even the idea of free will versus predestination. Like,
Yeah.
does God pick you, or do you pick God? And
Yeah.
were you already saved before you were born? And like that is a weird thing to deal with, but I think, like, that's something I was still wrestling with, like, even going off to school at Indiana Wesleyan, and
Hmm.
kind of coming to the place as a young adult of, like, is it okay if I just don't know, if I don't have an answer for this? And but I think it was that kind of wrestling with it that really led me to keep wrestling with all sorts of things into adulthood, as I traveled and would play at these conferences and festivals and churches and uh, Christian events, and that really just, like, challenged and eventually shattered my worldview. And then I as a young adult in the middle of all that, to have this guy Rob Bell come out with this book called Velvet Elvis that sort of scared the shit out of me, in the sense of, oh, like, can that be true? Like, what does he mean if Mary wasn't a virgin? Like, would my faith crumble? Of course it would crumble, you know. And I think that definitely was probably the biggest thing that had sort of caused a major shift in my thinking and how I was looking at the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So that book was like sort of one of the sort of things that started you questioning and sort of looking at evangelicalism as this sort of trying to represent all of Christianity in a perfect sort of way. Like, I might be putting words in your mouth a little bit there.
The very beginning of it, but why? And then I would say which time that I read it, because every time I read it, I was at a different place in my journey and still progressing. Mm-hmm. And I started even seeing things in that book in a new way that I wasn't even able to see the first time or the previous time that I had read it. And that book changed my life, absolutely. And I'm sure other things around my circumstances helped that along. But yeah, I would say that was the gateway drug for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so you started to like sort of compare what you were learning from this book to the sort of experiences and what you saw modeled like in the places you were at. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And with the way that lived out with my bandmates, with the people we would meet on the road, and just everywhere we would go. You know, I've been in all 50 states and I've been in 20 countries, and I think that has constantly been things that have challenged me and challenged my faith. Like, why do I think this? And, mm-hmm. To be quite honest, I was so into Rob and what he was teaching, Rob Bell, that I had some days off up in Grand Rapids and decided to go to his church. And I thought, I got to meet this guy. And so I did. And we actually became friends, and he became quite a mentor of mine. And instead of just like straight out teaching me stuff, he would let me ask him whatever questions I wanted to ask him. Mm. And then instead of giving me answers, he would give me books to read. and then he would have me write what I thought about the book to him. So I'd write these essays, like full out essays to him about what I thought about these books. And that really took me along in my journey as far as, figuring out what were the right questions. And I think I was already figuring that out, but each of those answers led to more questions. Mm-hmm. And I remember the first time that I wrote him, I was so nervous to ask this, and this is really funny to me now, but at the time it scared me. But I wrote him an email and I said, do you think it's possible to be a Christian and put your faith in Jesus and not believe that God wrote every word of the Bible? They like to believe that it's infallible,
right.
And I think he got such a kick out of that.
Yeah.
And he just said, hey, you're actually you're actually asking questions that most people that grow up in that tribe can never ask, that will never be able to. And right. And so that moment when that clicked, when he sort of affirmed, like said it was okay for me to ask that question, that was definitely the radical shift in how I was seeing things, and allowed me to really start looking back at all the things that I thought in new ways that I hadn't even been able to allow myself to think before. Like, that didn't even seem like an option growing up. Like, that was never on the plate, you know? And what's crazy is how I grew up assuming that the idea that the Bible is inerrant or infallible, or all these words that we've come up with,
Right.
That was somehow like one of the things like Jesus taught or something. Like, hey, a few hundred years from now, somebody's going to put together all these, letters and books, and you have to believe that all that is inerrant, or you can't follow me. And all of a sudden I was like, oh wow, like I cannot believe I was so brainwashed and so entrenched in this culture, this evangelical culture, in our time and place today,
right.
that I couldn't even allow my brain to go there. And I mean, that's a weird thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so by this point I was already, so yeah, to make everything way more complicated, at this point I was already married. I had a little baby girl. I had another little baby boy on the way. And I was not able to process this at this point yet, but I was gay. And I think, these things that I had not even been able to allow myself to think as a kid, to believe that God would hate me if I was gay, that being gay is a choice, all these things that are a part of that culture.
Yeah.
That sees the Bible a very specific way. And even though there are 33,000 denominations or whatever it is, there are certain no-nos, and one of those is you cannot be gay. Like, God hates homosexuality, you'll burn, no child of God can be in that, and as somebody who grew up wanting to be in love, wanting to have a family, wanting to experience all those things, I just believed that that I was supposed to fall in love with a woman, and that's what God's will for me was. And so, even though I had like a few girlfriends that all lasted like way longer than you think they would when there's no physical chemistry there. Like, I never even made out with a girl before I got married, and the most I ever did with a girl was like a peck goodnight. And so to sort, it was very easy to like quote unquote stay pure until marriage, and so I had put all my faith into believing that was part of the package deal. That was God's will for me. And so there was this girl that that I did love. Like, she was a great friend. We had fun together, and I thought, yeah, she's the kind of person I could see myself having a family with. And there's this thing that I'd never been able to share with anybody, in the back of my mind of, oh gosh, I hope I can be physically attracted to her. But, in my mind, my brainwashed mind, I thought, but, when it's like being in a cult, and you can't really see the logic of it until you're out of the cult, and sort of like, I don't know if you've ever seen the M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village, but this pretty much wraps up being an evangelical. Like, you're stuck in this village, and it's until you get outside of it and you find the street, and there's like, modern technology,
right?
And you look back and you realize, oh my gosh, what was I doing?
Right.
But it's like you just can't see it when you're so brainwashed and entrenched in it. And
and
that's where I was. And
absolutely.
So I wanted to fall in love with this girl, and I didn't have anything to compare it to. I had never had sex with a guy. I had never gotten to make out with a guy. Like, I didn't believe that was God's will for me. And even though I'd definitely had those attractions and feelings, I felt shame, deep shame. And because I felt that deep shame, that didn't seem right either. Like that was not my logical go-to growing up in that. And so, for anybody listening, I woke up with no voice this morning, so I'm trying to make it through here. But
you're braving it. I appreciate it.
No, it's no worries. I sound so raspy right now, but it's fine. Anyway,
it's okay. If you want, you can take a break and go grab some water real fast.
I mean,
Oh yeah, it's fine. I have some tea right here.
okay.
But
All right.
thank you. Yeah, but growing up, so I had nothing to compare it against. I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like. And I do think maybe there was a sort of sad feeling in me at some point where I was just like, well, maybe this is what being in love is. Maybe this is how it's supposed to feel. Because I thought and hoped for so long it would feel different. And then I think I just thought, if I'm faithful to God, um, if I do the right thing by being straight and not being gay, and then if I put my faith in that, then when I get married, hopefully, prayerfully, fingers crossed, it will just all magically work. And I literally believed that. And of course, I feel terrible about it now, but in that moment, it was very this pure thought of like how I had grown up being taught like this was the right thing to do. And so I did. I got married and then found out very quickly, even that first week of my marriage, where my mind would have to go to even be able to try to perform. And it became very torturous very quickly for both of us. I thought, why isn't this working? It's got to get better. And then all of a sudden I found myself, years into my marriage, still hoping and wishing for the same things to get better. And it's weird that I just compartmentalized it so much that I kept hoping something would change that would make it different, and it never did. And of course, but it's hard to see when you're on the other side.
Hey Jesus, can you hear me now? It's been a while since I came out. I was wondering, do you love me the same? You see, I've loved you since I was young, tried to be the greatest son. Now I'm wondering, could they love me the same? 'Cause I know that I could never change. I tried so hard, brought so much pain, and I just wanna be loved for who I am.
And so so I had 2 kids, and then 2 summers ago 2 summers ago I came out publicly to my fans, but about 7 months before that I sort of came to this place in my life where everything hit the fan. And for the first time in my marriage, my wife was able to seriously ask me in a serious way, are you gay? And it scared me so much. And I realized at that moment that my life was falling apart, and there was nothing I could do about it. And so I thought I could either push this down even further and make it worse, or I could try to get help. And so at that point, I'd already been progressing very much in my faith, and how I believed about things was very different at that point. And I'd already come to a place where I felt affirming of other people. It just still didn't feel like an option for myself. Again, it felt so compartmentalized.
Yeah.
And so I reached out to an affirming pastor friend of mine, and started talking to him for a couple hours, explaining how I'd felt since I was a kid. And when I was a kid, through all this stuff, like not even just the, sort of Calvinist versus Armenian ideas. It was so much more. I was that kid that, I'd read the Bible as a teenager, front to back, Genesis to Exodus 6 times as a kid. I memorized the book of James. I was in this thing called Bible Bowl where you just knew Bible trivia. Like I was like that nerd.
Yeah.
And it was so important to me. And I think part of it was maybe trying to even understand myself, trying to understand, why do I feel this way? And I took a lot of solace and comfort in the story of Jonathan and David and 1 Samuel chapters 18 through 20. And I thought to myself, like, again, this is kind of growing up in that worldview, but I just thought, man, if I could just find a friendship like that, then maybe I wouldn't have to be gay. And because that was the last thing I wanted, and because I was so scared of it. And from the way I grew up, it was just taught as this awful, awful thing. And so, yeah, I think I started explaining all this to a friend of mine, and after a couple hours of talking, I said for the first time out loud to somebody, I said, I think I might be gay. And I just lost it. I started bawling and bawling. Oh. And it scared me so much, but it also felt so liberating to say it out loud to somebody. And yeah, so he got me with a counselor, a friend of his, and through a few months of counseling, I finally was able to admit to myself and my family that I was gay, and I came out. And then several months later, I came out publicly to my fans, and that was a bit crazy. But, now looking back, it's crazy to see how healthy your life can get when you're honest with yourself and you're vulnerable. And I just cannot believe how happy and free I feel. All these things that I thought I was never going to feel like. I think I had just sort of at some point in my marriage had thought, well, this is like this thing that I can never tell anyone that I've have these feelings, and I will do whatever it takes to be the man that my wife needs me to be. And it took me that long to realize I'm never going to be. I'm not the man my wife needs me to be by hiding this, and I'm never going to be that, because I am not a straight man, and that was very hard to accept. And I thought I was making a sacrifice for her, but what I was really doing was keeping her just as tortured as I was. And I did not understand that for a very long time. And, I think because I was able to do the studying and sort of come to this sort of, because I was able to leave this fundamentalist ideology before I came to that place of accepting myself. Yeah. I am thankful that I'd already done the work there, because I was at least able to not have to beat myself up like crazy at that point, as awful as it felt. And it hurt like crazy. And there was so much to grieve in that time. I also knew, hey, I am just as much of a victim of this as anyone, and my wife is a victim. She was a victim, but we were both victims to this super toxic theology that is taught in really the whole fundamentalist evangelical Christian world. And when you grow up being brainwashed to believe you can be something that you're not, and that God will hate you if you are gay, I'm sorry, but you end up making kind of shitty decisions, and that's not your fault. And the church would love to blame you and villainize you and make you look evil like mine did, because it is way easier for them to villainize the LGBTQ person than it is to take responsibility for the fact that, hey, it's because we raised you to think this way. Is why your marriage is fucked up. It's why you ended up where you did. And for them to have to do that would mean having to rethink everything they do. And most churches don't want to do that. And that's why it takes a really long time to see these churches and denominations change, because they don't want to take responsibility. And that's tough. That's extremely tough. But it's also given me a passion to be in this for the long fight, and also to see and realize how many people have been in it for a long fight before me, that allowed me to come to a place of being able to accept myself. And man, it is crazy. It is crazy how damaging this theology is in all kinds of ways, but especially in this case for the LGBTQ community. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I face the effects of that now. There's been a lot of time grieving things that I've missed out on in life because I couldn't accept myself and how long it took me to. And I definitely have time to grieve that, but I also have two beautiful kids, and I think anybody with kids understands this, that doesn't matter how messed up it was that you got there. It doesn't make any of it okay. But once you have kids, you wouldn't change it for the world, because now you got these two beautiful kids. And so it doesn't, I've had people from my church I grew up in tell me, well, hey, you can't call our theology toxic when that's the reason you have your kids. I'm like, is that what you tell rape victims? That, hey, it can't be that bad when you have your beautiful kid. Like, that does not make it better. And and I think that's very important for people to understand as well, because these people are so hell-bent on defending their little box that they live in, because they're so scared it's going to crumble, that they would way rather hurt you, villainize you, and demonize you than think there might be a chance something is wrong with the systemic oppression.
Yeah. That's so much to have endured and gone through for you and for your entire family.
Sure.
I mean, with just sort of focusing on what's happened in the last 2 years, because it was around it was just around 2 years ago, right, when you had your feature published in a Columbus Arts magazine, and
it's called 614 magazine,
right.
and so I guess when that happened, it got picked up by like the New York Times and Billboard magazine and all those kind of things went
and it sort of
everywhere,
right, and it sort of happened. It was a very public event, and you were a public figure already, and then you have this sort of scrutiny placed on you.
I think I guess scrutiny, but also at the same time I got very lucky, I think, and in the sense that, well, one, it was definitely an encouragement to me how much the world has changed over the last several years, and how it's so much easier. It was so much easier for me to come out 2 years ago than it was 8 years ago when Jennifer Knapp came out, and how much hurt was put on her. And there were definitely a lot of people throwing stones at me, but when I came out, it was like the number one trending topic in the world on Facebook for a few days, and I was so lucky to have the mainstream media just pour out so much love on me, because it really did drown out any of the hate that came in. And there were just millions of people coming to stand by my side, that it really all the sort of homophobes and the vitriol paled in comparison. And so I think I got very, very blessed in that way, and it was wonderful, because I was able to use my story to have a chance to share it in a very honest and vulnerable way, where I think I was able to impact a lot of other people's lives and give other people courage to know that they're loved. And I don't know. I think that was very important for me, and that was definitely my hope in sharing it in that way. And I don't know. It was exciting to see. Hey, the world is changing, and it's changing fast right now, which is great.
Yeah. It is definitely, and there are plenty of communities that are very openly active, like in affirming like the faithfully LGBT like hashtag that is really active on Twitter and elsewhere. Different elements of like various people that have been on this podcast, ex-evangelicals of many different stripes, even if they don't use that term all the time. There's a lot of activity around around being very affirming. And there is obviously there's a lot of activity on the other side. And I mean, even with the Supreme Court case with the baker and everything that just got handed down this week when we record this, there's it's still there.
Still a lot of mixed
there's
feelings
still
out there.
There's a lot of, I mean, there's still people that want to discriminate and that have that toxic theology and toxic belief. But it is heartening to hear that the response overall to your announcement and then the way in which you did it was received well.
Absolutely.
So since that time, you've also started to record on your own. So how did that transition start to happen as well?
Yeah, so I think at that time I just decided that I really wanted to hang up my old Christian band and start over. I had been doing that band since I was 16 years old, and it was just I was so ready for something new. I had put out a side project actually with another guy the summer before that, like basically 3 months before my life had hit the fan, and ended up having quite a falling out when all this happened, and just sort of decided in that time, hey, I want to start over, and I want to start fresh as me and getting to be my most authentic self. And so I decided to put out my first solo album. And so I obviously wasn't on a Christian record label anymore. And I just did a Kickstarter and I raised all the money to do it. And I just put out my first album. It's called Love is Love. And I'm very proud of it. It's very personal and very much about all the kind of range of emotions that I have felt over these last couple of years. And it's been really therapeutic and good. A couple of songs I definitely wrote, spent half the time writing, laying on my floor, crying my eyes out. And then some of them are just sort of turning the corner and are about sort of the excitement that I have felt of getting to experience those things that I had never experienced before. Those butterflies that you allow yourself to feel and you don't feel shame over. You get to feel excitement just like any person should. And there's definitely songs about that. And that's sort of like, I don't know, those crushes and all those things that I had never gotten to experience before. And so it's been really good. And so I put out that record just a couple months ago. I've put out a couple of music videos for it. I'm getting ready to shoot another one, and I'm also working on my first book right now. So definitely have plenty keeping myself busy with, but I'm very excited and grateful to be doing it and feeling like I'm able to use my work and my art to talk about my story, or just like even, think about my own story in an artistic way, and to have that vulnerability. I think there's just like a level to it that I had never been able to go personally, because I had never been able to allow myself to open up to even think about those things. And so to kind of be at this place in my artistic journey and my own life where I feel like there's this level of vulnerability that I have never been at before is very exciting. And, it's nice because there's no rules. And I think one thing that's scary about the Christian music industry is what makes it feel so fake and generic to so many people is it is, because it's like the one genre, that's not described by its style, but its belief. And it's like it's this expected belief. So even if you don't feel those things, you're expected to write about it. And there is it automatically takes the vulnerability and transparency out of your music, which I believe is what leads to so much shitty Christian music. And that's an interesting thing to process. But I've definitely spent these last couple of years, as I've been able to kind of find myself, also processing why I got to where I did and how I ended up where I did and what led me to make the decisions that I did. And I think there is so much to talk about and fight against when it comes to the systemic oppression of the LGBT community in the evangelical church. That I think there's a huge fight ahead, and I think it's worth every bit of it. And I'm just realizing how it affected me, how it affected my ex-wife, how it affects so many people, millions and millions of people. It's disgusting, and it's sad, and it's toxic, and it's damaging. And I don't know. I feel this passion to see it change, and it's changing everywhere else. And like slavery, I think the church is always behind everybody else. But I and so many things that we've had to work through as a humanity, women's rights, equal rights for people of different colors, for the LGBT community. This just happens to be one of the big things that we're trying to work through right now. Obviously, all those other things are still there and not completely worked through. Right. But I think this is something that has become a huge issue in our time, and I don't know. I hope to see it change, and I definitely am doing everything I can to keep my kids from having to unlearn a bunch of stuff when they get older that could mess up their lives. And so that's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, head full of stars. Yeah, you swore you saw the love leaking from your heart. Down the boulevard, city lights swallowed up by an endless dark. Trying to break that chain, pulling all that weight. Well, it just makes you strong. When you're walking free, after bleeding beat, welcome back to the dawn.
So one thing that I think would be really interesting to hear you talk about is for someone that might find themselves in either like an evangelical youth group or a Christian college, in a sort of place where they are being taught something that makes them devalue themselves or question their sexuality and the validity of their sexuality. What are the sort of things that you would want them to hear, and the sorts of things that had been encouraging to you as you had to reckon with your sexuality in such a very painful and difficult way. I mean, just in the way in which you described it, like there was this grieving, there was this denial of it, there was having to come to terms, all these elements to how you described how you experienced this for so much of your life.
Right.
For someone that might be a young person that is developing feelings just like anyone does, but is being taught this toxic theology that we've been talking about that denigrates LGBTQ people. What do you think would be good for them to hear in this?
I would say. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to.
Oh no, I was just I was rambling. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I would say there's a couple different things there, because the first thing you have to see is what can you help and what can't you. And so anytime, if you can help it and you are able to come to this realization, this environment is bad for me. It is actually hurting my life. It is destroying the way I feel. It's making me feel like something is wrong with me, that I'm unvalued. my first instinct is yes, run from that. Like, that is not where the life is. Anytime you find yourself in a place that that you realize this is not where the life is, I definitely believe it is always good to run from that if possible. And so, I think there are cases that you'll find where where that is a lot easier said than done. Like, a kid whose family goes to an evangelical church, he's part of this, he or she is, or they are a part of this evangelical youth group, community, whatever. Or, I just met with some students from Liberty University last month, and just seeing how difficult of a situation that they found themselves in, because I think all of them were hoping the same things, that it would get better, that, that those feelings would go away, that if they would just commit their lives to God, that it would be fine. And also, they're kind of working through all those things while they're already there, while they've already paid the tuition to go there, while it would be super hard for them to just uproot everything and go. And I'm sure each of them are in different situations. Maybe some can, but a lot of them can't. And so I would just say, like, my biggest thing that I'm realizing and that I've seen over these last couple of years is it is not just about the quote unquote clogger verses. And if there are any LGBTQ listeners that have grown up in the faith, they understand what I'm talking about, because it only talks about same-sex acts 6 times in the Bible, and yes, I understand why that there are things that are valid, that are worth talking about, like this fact that the word homosexual was not even a word until like the late 1800s, and so when you see homosexual in the Bible, that's not what it was saying. But I don't think it's if you want to be flippant, yes, you could quickly say, oh, well, they're not talking about the same thing. And yeah, maybe they're not, because they wouldn't have understood what it would be like to be in a committed same-sex relationship. Now, my only point is, even if you tried to explain that to Paul right now, if like somehow that was possible, who wrote most of the New Testament, I'm not automatically assuming, oh, he would be on board. Oh, sorry, I had this all wrong, because I'm sure most of what he saw, or what they saw in ancient cultures, would have been temple prostitution with other, with boys, or all kinds of things that married men sleeping with guys on the side, probably because they were gay and it was culturally assumed you should get married. And so, like, I get all that, but you can't even have a realistic conversation, in my opinion, about that if you're still playing the same game that fundamentalists are playing. So if your goal is to keep having these same assumptions that God wrote the entire Bible, it's all inerrant and flawless, and all these things that we've come up with, to me, you're not going to convince somebody that has their own fundamentalist beliefs by trying to keep a fundamentalist theology and getting people to believe that it's not wrong to be gay. And maybe you will, some people, and maybe that's even for lack of cognitive brain work to actually like really wrestle with it and try and figure it out. Because more often than not, in those circumstances, I would say that people probably come to change because they see somebody that they love that's in a loving relationship with someone of the same sex, or I don't think I just don't think it's that simple. But what I think is very important for people in those situations is to not start with, oh, well, does the Bible say it's wrong to be gay? Yeah, you can have that conversation, but what I think is way more important to start with is, how do I look at the Bible? Do I look at it as a trajectory of ancient history of how people experience the divine, and I think when you can look at it that way and see it, that it can be this beautiful thing, but it's not something that God ordained and wrote every word of, and you have to figure out. And if it was, there wouldn't be 33,000 denominations of different ideas and beliefs and blah blah blah.
Right.
But so to me, that's like a way more important starting conversation, because how you see your faith, if you have that faith still, is way more important as a foundation of working out those other things when you talk about, well, what did that really mean when they wrote that? Because if your starting point is still in fundamentalism, I think, honestly, you're just going to keep beating yourself up. And I see people do it all the time. And I don't think that's healthy or good. And I think it can still lead to really bad beliefs in other things. And you don't want to be this person that wants to be accepted that still has very bigoted ideas about other things. And
Right.
so, to me, whether you're a Christian or agnostic or some other faith or atheist, I don't care. What has to be the most important starting point of our lives is to admit that you don't have to know. You don't have to know everything, and
Right.
it's okay. It's okay to not know, and that isn't that supposed to be the idea of faith anyway? It's okay to not have to have the answer for everything, and to admit that there are certain things that you just can't know. And the thing that I automatically think for any young person, this was a long way of getting to this answer, but I think for any young person that is in that place, I would say do not trust anybody that pretends to have definite answers of things that you definitely cannot know for sure. And
That's a good line.
and so if you put your faith in Jesus or God or the Christian faith, and you are in that evangelical environment, and whether it's your school or your church or youth group or whatever, and you're in a place that you feel like you either enjoy being there or you're sort of stuck there for this season of life, start with that. Start with not trusting anyone that pretends to have the answers definitively of things that you cannot definitively have the answers for. And if people can say, hey, I don't know, if you can start every belief with, I could be wrong, but here's what my faith is, then at least that's a healthy place to start.
Mm-hmm.
And if you cannot do that with your framework of your faith, I would say those should be your first kind of flags, red flags of something is definitely wrong here.
Yeah. So it does sound like for you still, it's also like faith remains an important part of your life, and something that you continue to engage in even as you've even as you've had these momentous shifts in your life over the last few years.
Yeah, definitely. I personally grew up loving the stories of the Bible, the stories of Jesus. I personally think that there's a lot of things in the Bible that probably did not happen, especially in the Old Testament, that were handed down orally for probably hundreds of years before they actually got written down. And a lot of them were meant to be stories. And it's very easy for literalist fundamentalists to categorize these things wrong, because they want it all to be this like same equal spectrum through the whole thing, which leads to a lot of really illogical things. And so, yeah, for me, I love the idea of Jesus, and I love I love believing that the stories of him are true, while I also deep down think all the time. I mean, does anybody think the same thing all the time? Even your beliefs, whether you're
Right.
atheist, like there's got to be sometimes we're like, well, maybe there's a God, you know. And I think for me as a Christian, I still self-identify as a Christian. I think, yeah, there's probably a really good chance a lot of this is wrong or just did not happen or has been retold for whatever reason, you know, and I think there are times that I feel differently about what my faith looks like, but I also love believing that there is some divine energy, being, God, whatever you want to call it. I believe that there's hopefully something more going on than we can understand, because none of it makes sense. Whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God, like the fact that we're here, the fact that any of this is happening right now, that we're on a ball spinning in space, that there is space or a universe or a solar systems, it's crazy. It's weird. The whole thing is weird. And so I personally love believing that there's some divine thing that did it that is a part of it on purpose, that we are purposely here and we are loved, and that there's some kind of joy from us being here. And for me and my faith tradition, I love believing that there was this guy, Jesus, that talked about these things. And I love the message of Jesus that that everything can be summed up in loving that divine being with all your heart and everything you have. And the only way that you can know what it is to love that divine being is to love your neighbor. And so if that was the message of Jesus, if that's what it all came down to, is to love God with everything you have. You can say God, you can say something else, I don't care. But like, you know, to believe that there's something more and to have gratitude for that. And the only way you can have gratitude for that is to love your neighbor as yourself. That's a faith tradition I love. I can get behind, and that I can be proud to be a part of, and that I can be thankful that I grew up believing that, because all the other weird twisted stuff didn't come until I was a little bit older. You know, I grew up like most kids believing that Jesus really does love all the little children of the world, right? And so whatever. To me, it's not that big of a deal if you still identify with that, or if the version of Jesus you were handed was so awful and messed up your life so bad that you don't want any part of that. I get that, you know?
Right.
And that's why I also say run from that if you find yourself in that toxic situation. But also
definitely
realize everybody grows up with different versions of Jesus handed to them. And that's part of the thing that I have toured in thousands of churches all over the world, is seeing that a lot of people may have grown up with really healthy versions of Jesus, and then a lot of people probably haven't. And if your whatever you believe about salvation, or if your relationship with God is somehow dependent on the not even what religion you grew up with, but like which version of the religion you grew up with. Well, gosh, maybe then maybe the whole predestination thing is right, you know. But like, so it's so goofy to think that even can be possible. And so I guess for me, and like the way I'm raising my kids is like, you know, to grow up with this gratitude for this divine being, but to understand that it doesn't matter which belief you grow up with, but just to be thankful for this life. And the only way you can ever know what it might be to know God or this divine thing that has given us life, whether that's like a cognitive being or whether that's some energy of whatever the universe is, if you can have a gratitude for that, the only way you can express that gratitude is to love your neighbor, then that's what I want to raise my kids with, and for them to believe. And that means whatever it is your neighbor believes, that as long as that's not destroying other people's lives, if that's as long as that's not some systemic oppressive belief, then that's okay. And
Right.
and when those beliefs, yeah, do become problematic, are when they are damaging other people's lives. And I think that is important to talk about. And so it's not as simple as believe whatever you want, because if your belief destroyed my life growing up, well then fuck your belief. But
Yeah, and
but
that's
I,
exactly it, right? That's why, I mean,
yeah,
that's why people speak out against things like this, these aspects of evangelicalism that are
yeah,
so entrenched, that they damage people's lives constantly, whether
yeah.
it's,
But
yeah,
yeah,
and that's
what
exactly
I
it.
will say is, for as many times as I wanted to feel the divine, and so many of these churches that I've been a part of or grew up in or have played at, and how many times those things have felt empty and generic and grasping for something that wasn't there, and I'm sure so many of us can relate to those feelings, like, come on, God, why can't I feel you right now? I will say where I have felt uh, maybe that feeling more than anywhere has been the time at my favorite gay bar here in Columbus, Ohio, or anytime that I go out to gay bars or gay pride events, because to see people that have been so damaged and so hurt by families, by their faith community, by so many things. I see people come into this space where that no matter who you are, uh, how you're living your life, that you're loved and accepted exactly as you are, and that you can come into that place and feel like it's okay to be you. Like, gosh, doesn't that sound like what the church was supposed to be like? And I think yeah, I feel that every time I go into like a gay bar or a gay dance club, and or queer, whatever, LGBTQ, and and uh it's been amazing to me, because I've had the most spiritually moving conversations with so many people in those spaces that feel way more meaningful and deep than so many experiences I've had in church walls. And I think there's a good reason for that, because there's this acceptance level and vulnerability level and lack of judgment. And I think I don't know. I think I've realized, gosh, that's what Jesus was up to. Like all these stories about Jesus hanging out with the drunkards or the prostitutes or whatever, and Jesus constantly saying, do not judge, like all of a sudden, like when you walk into a gay bar, you're like, oh my gosh, it all just made sense. Like that's what it was about. I wish more and more churches would get that, especially in that evangelical community,
Yeah,
where there is so much judgment and so much lack of acceptance, and
right.
you can't be a leader, you can't help with our kids, something is wrong with you. Like when you can let go of those judgments and those fears, it's an absolutely beautiful thing, and that's been interesting and beautiful and extremely emotional to find that community in the LGBTQ community over these last couple of years, for sure.
Hmm. I think that sentiment that you mentioned, like of, it comes across in one of your songs, actually, the "Don't Dance" one, because
Yeah.
you actually have a line in there about, like, if you think I'm going to hell,
Yeah.
don't dance.
Yeah. Like I said, every one of those songs is very personal. But yeah, I think like there's a certain lightheartedness to that, but also very direct. I think here's the deal: like there's this party going on, and maybe this was the message of Jesus the whole time, but there's this party going on you're invited. But if you're gonna sit in your judgmental stinkhole, stay home. Don't come. And that's what hell is. Go live in your own hell, and we're all gonna we're all gonna dance, we're all gonna party, and you choose whether you want to live in your judgmental world of fear or not. And I think, that's very much something that has been crazy to see and experience, and gosh, to have the gratitude to come out of that world and to come out of the village and see what it's like on the other side, and go, holy shit, that was crazy. And like that, what a good feeling to just feel freedom from that. And it's crazy to me because I talk about this all the time, but there are so many people that are still so entrenched in that world of fear that it's almost like I see it in their faces when I talk to them about it, or when I do talk about it. Just how much freedom and joy and peace that I have felt from accepting myself and coming to this place in life. But it's not just about being gay. It's leaving that whole world of fear and judgmentalism, and to be set free from all that. Oh my gosh, that is the most overwhelming, joyful feeling that you can ever experience. And that pisses people off because they think, man, if I just do this right, if I stay in the Word, if I sacrifice all this joy and live my life for God, then I'll experience that joy and peace that it talks about in the Bible.
Right.
And it's completely missing the whole mark. It's such a totally different belief system than Jesus, and I think that's the thing that the same things that pissed Jesus off about religious people then, the sort of Pharisees and the whole culture of doing the right thing and having the right beliefs. I think those are the same things that Jesus railed against in his day. And it's weird when you grow up in this religion in his name to find out, oh gosh, we just grew up like the Pharisees that Jesus hated, and that's a hard thing to accept, especially when that's your comfort zone, that's your worldview, that's your tribe, and leaving the tribe, gosh, that's one of the scariest things you can do.
Absolutely. That's exactly what this whole endeavor that we're talking about is all about.
I get it.
It's
I love what you guys are doing, and
you're absolutely right. I'm really just trying to affirm what you're saying is it takes a lot of, it does take that vulnerability, but there is an upside. There can be a cost.
Oh yeah.
But and the one of the things that people, it was for me. Like there's like a sunk cost fallacy. You sunk so much time and energy and effort into this. And damn it, it's gonna pay off. But sometimes the sunken cost just doesn't pay off. That's why it's called a fallacy, and that is why it can be so hard, and why it's so good to hear stories like yours and like so many others of people that have moved on, and there's bad that comes with it, but there's also good.
Yep.
And that's what that's what can be encouraging, and even just knowing that there are people like yourself that have done that.
Well, thank you, and it's nice to be able to sort of share with other people that have gone through similar journeys, and especially in this kind of world of evangelicalism and fundamentalism, and to be able to finally get away from it and be around when you've been asking yourself, when you've been so entrenched in it for so long, and you've been and there's this part of you deep inside going, am I crazy? Like, is this is this real? Like, what? Am I the crazy one? Is like, am I the only one that thinks this is nuts? And to find out, oh my gosh, there's all these other people that have gone through the same thing, and to be able to kind of share that together and talk about our experiences and tell our truths and have that vulnerability. And once that fear is gone of having the wrong belief or fitting up to some standard that people expect from you, like, especially like being in a Christian band or just being in an evangelical church where you're not supposed to drink, you're not, or at least not around those people,
right.
or cuss, or you're supposed to like say the right things, like, oh, I'll be praying for you, brother, like just whatever, like to finally be able to let go of all of those things that you're supposed to do or supposed to think, and to just be honest, and to realize in that honesty and that vulnerability, that's where the freedom is, that's where the peace is and the joy, and then to share that and share it with other people that have gone through the same thing. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, definitely. So what are you what's on the horizon for you right now? What do you have going on?
I mean, it is Pride Month, so I'm kicking off Pride season and in full gear, doing a bunch of Pride festivals around the country and doing some other festivals as well. There's actually one Christian festival that I still partake in down in North Carolina called Wild Goose Festival, and it's actually a very progressive one. There's an LGBTQ tent there. There's a beer tent by Main Stage. It's like the most non-Christian Christian festival ever. It's great, and to kind of I'll be performing there, and I'm doing a bunch of shows all around the country. I'm actually doing a bunch of house shows. I do this thing around my concerts called Trey's Safe Space Tour, and I have a private group on Facebook called Trey's Safe Space where there's just a bunch of people that it's basically for any LGBTQ person or allies that want to come just like share stories, questions, have those conversations. And so I actually go around talking at a lot of like different house shows or sometimes churches that are affirming and accepting, where I share my story and just talk about things. So I'm actually doing a lot of that through the summer and into the fall as well. And I'm, like I said earlier, I am working on my first book. And so I think between all that and promoting the new album, there's actually a couple other things going on that I can't talk about yet, but I'm keeping quite busy and being a dad of 2 crazy kids. So we actually just got done hiking and tucking them in right before I got on this conversation with you. So that keeps me quite crazy as well. But they get to go out with me a bunch too, sometimes. Great. And so I'm co-parenting and figuring out half of my life being this kind of single dad, and the other half of my life figuring out what it's like to be a single gay man and experience these things in life that I never got to before, and that's quite exciting as well.
That's great. And where can people find you just online?
Yeah, just go to TreyPearson.com and you can find everything there. But all of my social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that is just at Trey Pearson. And so it's pretty easy to find me.
That's great. Trey, thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing so much of your story.
It was a pleasure, and I love what you're doing, and thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.
All right.
It's time to make your mind up. Quit trying to break a man down. I'm free to be myself when I'm alone. This time we gotta stand up. all around.